This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
Welcome back to the Fantasy Fanalysts podcast. Week 7's in the books. We're looking forward to week 8. We have a couple veteran faces returning to the NFL, making some waves in the fantasy football world. We'll discuss that. A couple big injuries as well. But first, Nick, how was your fantasy week 7?
I mean, it was okay. I ran into a buzzsaw in my yearly fantasy league. Obviously, Mike Evans not doing a damn thing hurt.
Yeah.
Kenyon Drake not doing a damn thing and then getting hurt. But everybody else on my team played, honestly, really well. I actually was impressed with the way everybody else played. I'm encouraged by Antonio Gibson's play, who, mind you, was filling in for Dalvin Cook this week. So he obviously had big shoes to fill as, one of my top running backs. So, and to see him, play well made me happy. Obviously, I had no Justin Jefferson as well, so I had to have Brandon Cooks come in and play for him, and he was okay. But my quarterbacks hit the ball out of the park. Obviously, I can only play one of them, but I have both Kyler Murray and Justin Herbert, and that either one of them, I think they ended up, the way our scoring works in this league, they ended up 0.1 points apart. So I could have played either one, and it wouldn't have made a difference because I still would have lost by 40 points. Mind you, I put up 140 points this week. I ran into a buzzsaw.
Oh my gosh.
I ran into a buzzsaw. Dude put up 180. It was rough. In DFS, I did win some money this week. I came out in the green by a few dollars. I wish I would have trusted myself a little bit more because I set this lineup originally, the one that won money. I set this lineup on Friday, and normally I wait until Saturday to set my DFS lineups. I normally wait until Saturday, usually Saturday afternoon, Saturday evening, set my DFS lineups, and then I tweak them Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. I actually set this one, and this was the only lineup I set on Friday, and I wish I didn't second guess myself at all and just ran with this across all formats, across all any league, any contest I entered. Because that lineup won me money in one of the big money leagues. Granted, with the hundreds of thousands of people in it, it only won me $7. But I mean, it only costed me $4 to enter one, and two, it still put up 175 points. So that would have been good enough for first or top 10 in pretty much any other contest I entered. So I wish I would have trusted myself and stuck with that lineup. Instead, I went with 3 or 4 different lineups this week. To try to balance things out, and I wish I didn't do that because I would have won a lot more money. But hindsight sees 2020.
Yep.
So, but I mean, fantasy weeks for me have been very up and down. There's been some weeks
for everybody.
This year in particular, it just seems like there's very much a lot of up and down. I'm either really down or I'm really up, or I'm up over here but down over here. I haven't had a week where I'm entirely, I had an awesome week. I'm up the whole way. Everything's great. Everything is awesome.
Everything is awesome.
But I also haven't really had a week that everything was absolutely terrible outside of maybe one. So it's been okay.
Mm-hmm. And the more leagues you're playing in, the more rare it becomes to have a week where everything is up and you're flying high throughout all leagues. But
especially if you mix things up.
Yeah. But I did stick with one lineup for FanDuel this week. Won me one league, didn't win me the other ones. I did play the Lions Falcons head to head, won some money in that.
Okay, there you go.
But the big winner was my actual fantasy team. I started Justin Herbert, AJ Brown, Terry McLaurin, and Kenny Galladay. Oh my gosh, those were raining points on that team.
Yeah, that's about 100 points combined right there. So everything else is cherry on top.
I went risky because I didn't want to drop a player, and my kicker's Rodrigo Blankenship. And I'm like, you know what? I'm just riding the bye. I still won by 70 points.
There you go. Going with the ballsy play of riding the bye on the kicker. I like it. I do.
If you're up to me, this league we didn't even have kickers, but it is what it is.
I am in a conundrum this week.
Yo.
So this is for my yearly fantasy league.
Uh-huh.
I have a lot of buys again this week because I had a lot last week, but I have a lot again this week. And I'm in a situation where I really don't have a second running back. I wouldn't have had Kenyon Drake either way this week because he's hurt. Who knows how long he's going to be out for, but he's also on a bye. I have Dalvin Cook, but Antonio Gibson also on a bye. My other running backs are Alexander Madison and Zach Moss. So I'm in an obvious conundrum here on what I can do at my second running back position here. I obviously can look at the waiver wire and see what I can grab there, but there isn't anything on that waiver wire that's really excited me too much. I mean, there's a couple of guys I'll say like, okay, yeah, maybe. But there's really nothing there that's made me jump out and say, hell yeah, like I got to go get a guy. I mean, there are some opportunities there, but you know, I really trying to figure out what I can do with that second running back spot because I can't, unlike you being able to afford to punt on a kicker and ride the bye, I can't really do that with a running back.
Yeah, you can't afford to do that with a running back. That's the tough part about running backs in fantasy is they are so hard to come by when it comes to waiver wires. And that's why there's such a premium on them in drafts is because it's a lot easier to grab a wide receiver off the waivers than it is to grab a running back off the waivers. I do have one running back that's in my waiver pickups. I'm not like I don't have full faith in him, but he's probably better than anything else you're going to get on the waiver wire. I can get into him right now if you want.
We'll jump into it a little bit. Let's hit up some news first. We did have some injury news this week. Chris Carson went down. That's obviously a big name on a lot of teams this year.
That's one banged up backfield in
it is
Seattle.
A very banged up backfield in Seattle, and Chris Carson going down. Granted, he was walking around on the sideline during the later on in that game, which may mean he could be available this weekend, but if he is, I expect him to be on some type of a pitch count, maybe a workload share or a time share in that backfield with Carlos Hyde. I don't know what to make of that situation. Chris Carson's a guy who is, in all honesty, often injured, so it doesn't surprise me to see him get banged up during this season. So, but that is one guy that did go down with, a big name injury for the Seahawks backfield. So, and your contingency plan there seems to be Carlos Hyde. He was pretty effective in the game this past weekend, and he's obviously a proven back in this league who's been managed to. I honestly kind of feel bad for him because he was really good for San Francisco. He's shown an ability to be successful in this league. So why doesn't he get an opportunity to be a starting back again somewhere? I don't understand it. It's one of those guys that's like, okay, why isn't he starting somewhere? Because he's got that caliber.
In terms of Seattle, it's completely dependent right now on his hamstring. He might not even be ready to go for week 8.
That is also true. That is also true.
So you might not even have Hyde in that backfield either.
Right. We also saw Jeff Wilson go down. He got carted off the field, so that backfield is in absolute shambles, and that's a guy who also ran for 112 yards this weekend. Yeah. So to see him go down hurts. Deebo Samuel injured his hammy again. OBJ. Is that an existing injury? OBJ went down for the year with an ACL tear.
Yep.
Was Deebo Samuel actually active this weekend?
Deebo was, I believe. He'd been on IR for a while.
Right.
I think he got reactivated here this past week or the weekend before.
Okay. We do get CMC, the return of run CMC this week. Christian McCaffrey's going to be coming off IR and is likely to be active.
He was activated in week 4.
Okay.
Earlier than I thought.
So run CMC back for the Panthers this week from what I know. So that's obviously a big boost to that team and that backfield.
Will he play? He's back off IR, but
he is back off IR. If he plays, that I don't know. I have heard he's likely inserted back into the lineup, but I don't know. I would think if you're taking a guy off IR, you're probably activating him and putting him in, maybe on a pitch count, but he probably will be suiting up.
Don't you love how pitch count is ubiquitous to all sports, even though it's a baseball term?
Yeah, I honestly, it is. I feel like it's a term that's fairly new too, though, to other sports, not to baseball, obviously, but to other sports. Like I feel like the term pitch count has recently entered the football and basketball worlds. Yeah. In the last, I'd say probably decade or so, because when rest became more prevalent, especially in the NBA, I feel like pitch count became something a lot more prevalent there.
Yeah.
So. But I'm curious, any other news you have here? What are your options for some of these guys that have gone down, and we'll continue on from there.
So I mean, there's definitely some big options in Cleveland after the injury of OBJ. Those will be highlighted in the waiver section as well. Yes. At least the one that I really believe in.
Yes.
In terms of Seattle, though, if Carlos Hyde doesn't go, I'm not going to sit here and advocate as this for this guy as a waiver pick, which I'm going to mention him now, I guess. But he would be an interesting pickup if Hyde doesn't go, and if there's some situation like you are, Nick, where you just really need someone to stream at running back, you could stream the rookie over there, DJ Dallas. Because if Hyde's out and Carson's out, he's probably going to get a good chunk of carries.
He has been someone who's been getting some passing down opportunities there. Pretty much has the passing down work over Carlos Hyde when Chris Carson's down. So that is something that is a little bit more intriguing, considering it is a full point PPR that I'm in as well. That does make him a little, his value does increase a little bit there also. So, but Corey Davis comes off of the COVID list this week. So he will be back active in that Tennessee wide receiver grouping. Do
you have as much faith in him as you did before AJ Brown came back?
I mean, no, he's obviously going to be the number 2 guy, but he has been effective, and I believe he was effective this week, or was it early on in the season? I can't remember. I had it written down somewhere, but
early on in the season he was effective.
Yes,
but he did have a good game.
He did have a good game this past week. 6 catches and a touchdown and he also led the team in targets, which is something that was pretty surprising for me, because the way AJ Brown's been playing and played this past weekend, I wouldn't expect to see that. Yeah. But as long as Corey Davis is getting involved in this offense, he is more of a red zone target than a guy like AJ Brown is. So you are going to see him get a lion's share of those targets in the red zone. Now, I do think he takes value away from Jonnu Smith down there. But it's also vice versa. There's the reverse side of that.
Back takes volume away from him, but
right. So, but as long as Corey Davis is continuing to get opportunities and seeing that target share in the double digits, you will see him have up weeks that he is, a major positive in terms of fantasy.
I think one really interesting piece of fantasy news that just happened is Antonio Brown signing to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. This is already a stacked receiving core.
Hint, I have him on my waiver list.
Oh, you do?
I actually have a waiver claim in for him right now.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
This is a stacked Tampa receiving core already before Antonio Brown came in. Now it's cluttered. But the question here is, how does this affect the value of guys like Godwin, of guys like Mike Evans, or even a smaller player like Scotty Miller, for example?
So I do think this drastically hurts Scotty Miller's value, because Antonio Brown has always played that dink and dunk, run after the catch type role, which is what Scotty Miller's been playing. I think he also hurts Chris Godwin's value for that reason. Now, I don't think he's as much of a downfield threat as Chris Godwin is at this point in his career or at his age. And I also don't think he's as much of a red zone threat as Mike Evans is. So I do think this does make Mike Evans far more touchdown reliant. And I don't know if you can be far more touchdown reliant than Mike Evans has been this year, but it does make him more touchdown reliant in that offense.
3 catches over the last 2 games.
Right. And I believe 2 of those were for touchdowns. I know he had a game where he had 2 catches for 2 touchdowns.
Oh, no, that was earlier. None of them were for touchdowns.
Okay.
Last 2 games, he has 3 catches, 47 yards, flat. That's
okay.
It.
So obviously, he was banged up at some point this year as well, and I think he is still a little bit too. But either way, it does make him even more touchdown reliant. I do think the presence of Antonio Brown doesn't necessarily hurt one player more than another in particular. I do think he takes value away from pretty much everybody in that receiving core, pretty much equally, especially a guy like Scotty Miller, who is probably going to become a bit of an afterthought to a guy like Antonio Brown in the slot or even out wide. So I think he's affected the most, and the other 2 guys they're going to have targets taken away from him as well, even if it's just a couple.
Yeah. I agree, though, that Mike Evans is probably the receiver I'm least worried about being affected by Antonio Brown's arrival. But he's also the receiver in this receiving core that just in general I'm most worried about.
Yes.
He's had 4 targets over the last 2 games. His target share has seemingly just disappeared for some reason after the 2 games prior having 17 targets. Going from that to the next 2 games having 4 targets. Where are you valuing a guy like Mike Evans right now?
I mean, he's still a low end wide receiver 1 to me. He has that potential. He is up there. I like we said, he is affected the least by the presence of Antonio Brown. But he's a guy that's going to have dud weeks, and the reason is because he is quite a bit touchdown reliant right now, and that's because the volume just isn't going his way. Is that because of an injury hampering him a little bit in his route running, or is it because of extra attention on the defense? It could be a little bit of both. I do think Tom Brady will find that connection at some point this season, probably this week or next week, whatever it is. I do think you will see a resurgence of Mike Evans. So if I'm looking on the outside as a fantasy owner, I'd be looking to buy low on Mike Evans right now because I don't know that his value would be any lower. With Antonio Brown returning, with him coming off of 2 straight bad weeks, the value could not be any lower on Mike Evans than it is right now. I would be looking at trying to buy low on Mike Evans because, again, I do think he's got probably the most potential in that receiving core with Antonio Brown coming into the fold. And I do think he does have a bounce back. Now, you could also take the other side of that and say it's time to sell on Mike Evans. Find a trade partner, get what you can for him. Try to jump off the ship while you can. But if you can find a way to buy low on Mike Evans, now would be a great time to do it because, again, the value is extremely low. And I do think he does have a bounce back at some point.
I have a buddy who's in the league right now, and the Mike Evans owner in his league is going full tilt. He was sending me pictures. He's offered him 3 Mike Evans trades already, like trying to trade him Mike Evans. And the most recent one, and I'm actually kind of curious to get your take on this now, is he would be receiving Mike Evans. Devontae Freeman is a throwaway piece.
Well,
and
Devontae Freeman also got hurt this week.
Yeah, it's a throwaway piece. And TJ Hawkinson, and he'd be trading away Mike Gesicki, Joe Mixon, and Travis Fulgham. And I was like, I think you're taking on too much risk with Mike Evans to be given away. Even though Joe Mixon's hurt, there's still no clear timetable on if it's going to be a long-term injury or if it's going to be just a couple weeks. I told him his opponent has Philip Lindsay. I told him to try to grab Philip Lindsay because he has Melvin Gordon. So I'm like, try to switch out Devontae Freeman for Philip Lindsay. That could be a better trade because then you have insurance on Gordon. But he kept asking, like, I don't know where to value Evans, dude. Like, I am lost with this guy.
It is kind of tough to value him, and I think
Fulgham's been on fire. So I'm like, I don't know if I'd want to trade away Fulgham if I were
Fulgham has been on fire, but like with any guys like that can fall off a cliff real quick at any point in time. So there is
especially now with Jalen Reagor coming off IR.
Right. So selling high on a guy like Travis Fulgham is honestly not a bad option. Now, is Mike Evans high enough? That's the question. I don't know that he is. The TJ Hawkinson portion of that is very intriguing because he has a guy who has performed this year, and I do think will continue to carve out more of a role in that offense as the season goes on. Because he is right now Matthew Stafford's number 2 pass catcher behind Kenny Galladay. The next guy is TJ Hawkinson. So he's going to continue to get those red zone looks, and he's going to continue to get the opportunities. So adding TJ Hawkinson to that fold does make it intriguing. Also with Mike Gesicki, there is a little bit of a worry there considering they are switching to the rookie quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa getting the start now. So I would be a little bit weary on Mike Gesicki moving forward because you have no idea if he's even going to have a rapport with Tua at this point.
Yeah, I'm not high on Gesicki at all.
I'm not either. So TJ Hawkinson, in my opinion, is a safer upgrade to Mike Gesicki. Running back, I do like the Philip Lindsay situation a lot better because Devontae Freeman is a throwaway. Exactly. And then Mike Evans, again, you do have that wide receiver 1 upside. There is a lot there, and Joe Mixon obviously has had some bust weeks, and he is hurt too. So there is some risk being taken on, but in all reality could be a situation where you do end up winning your fantasy league on that. Now, mind you, you are giving up what is likely the first running back you took in this draft. So you gotta be wary of that too.
Now, the other veteran receiver that got signed, Des Bryant, just got signed to the Baltimore Ravens practice squad. I can't imagine that they would go through trouble signing him and not bring him up at some point and have him play. But do you think he's going to be a fantasy factor at all? Guys have played football in 3 years.
No, frankly, I'm still in the camp that I don't even think he suits up on a Sunday. I think he gets cut before then. Des Bryant's been trying to make a comeback for years and never really has done anything. I mean, I believe he's been signed before early on in the season or during the season, and he got cut within a couple of weeks. I really don't expect Des Bryant to really make any kind of impact whatsoever.
Yeah, you're referring to the 2 years ago he signed with New Orleans and then he tore his Achilles.
Yes.
In like I think his first practice it was.
Yeah. I don't see. I mean, Des Bryant already had bad feet to begin with, so and he hasn't been the same receiver because of those bad feet. And then coming off an Achilles tear, I don't think there's anything left in the tank with Des Bryant for him to do anything, because once he was not capable of running the same type of routes that he was early on in his career, even Dallas wanted him gone. So I don't see him staking a claim in that Ravens wide receiving core, even if it is very thin. I don't see it being something as much of a factor. And in my opinion, the only reason they even brought him in is because I think the Ravens are honestly desperate at wide receiver and willing to kick the tires on just about anybody.
And he's the exact type of receiver. Like if he could return to even like half of what he was, he's a type of receiver that's like the perfect complement to a guy like Marquise Brown.
Absolutely. But the problem is, I don't even think he can return to a quarter of what he was in Dallas. I think Dez is done. I don't even know why he's trying to make a comeback.
Yeah. So I think we're both agreeing, though, that I don't think it warrants any fancy consideration. I'm not worried about. Well, I'm worried about Marquise Brown because he just hasn't been performing this year, but I'm not worried about
because of Des Bryant.
Yeah, I'm not worried about it because of Des Bryant. All right, move on to waivers.
Let's do it. My first guy to look at is going to be Brandon Ayuk, wide receiver from the 49ers.
That's my top guy.
He's been a weapon pretty much every single week. He's been on my radar since he came onto the scene, and plus you added to the fact that Deebo Samuel once again injured his hammy. That just means Brandon Ayuk is even more valuable than he was before. I'm looking at him potentially carving out an even bigger role in that offense this upcoming week, so I like him a lot.
Yeah, he had 6 catches for 115 last week. He's continued to expand that role. He's owned in 27% of ESPN leagues, so he's still out there.
I still don't understand why he's not owned in at least 40%. At least. Right? I feel like he's on a list every week.
I'm going to go Rashad Higgins. Owned in 0.5% of leagues.
I've got 1%.
He had 6 catches for 110 yards last week, and with OBJ out, I think he could become a major factor on this offense for the rest of the season. There's a lot of opportunity there. I think Rashad Higgins will make the most of it. So I like Rashad Higgins here.
I also have Rashad Higgins on my list, and it goes beyond the 6 catches for 110 yards in OBJ's absence. Look at the remaining schedule for the Cleveland Browns. It is stupid favorable. They've got the Raiders this week, Texans the next week, Eagles the following, Jaguars following that, Titans following that, before they hit a buzzsaw in the Ravens. But then after that, they've got a back-to-back with the Giants and the Jets come playoff time. Rashard Higgins has 7 very, very favorable matchups in the next 8 games, and that's including the playoff matchups for your fantasy season. Rashard Higgins is a guy that needs to be owned in at least 80% of leagues next week, because he's a guy who's going to be a big factor in that offense with the resurgence of Baker Mayfield as well here. I think Rashard Higgins is going to have a big role. And honestly, if you're able to get him, he could win fantasy leagues this year. I'm telling you.
So who's your priority then between the two, between Higgins and
Higgins is my number 1. Antonio Brown's my number 2. Higgins is much more of a sure thing, and there's less traffic in that offense.
Yeah. So I think Ayuk is your 3 then?
Yes.
Gotcha. Last question about the
mainly because I don't necessarily need a receiver. Yeah, that's why running back would be higher. But again, there's nobody on the running back waivers that I would value over any of those 3.
How far back is Donovan Peoples-Jones for you in that receiving core?
I don't even look at DPJ.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan. I mean, he could come up with a touchdown here and there, but I'm not big on his
I'm not even looking at DPJ. I didn't like him at Cass Tech. I didn't like him at Michigan, and I don't like him now.
All right, who's your next guy?
My next guy is JaMycal Hasty, the running back for the 49ers. He's 20% rostered, in, I believe this is ESPN leagues or CBS leagues, one of them. In one of these,
I have 6.6 in ESPN leagues.
Okay, well, whatever this one is, he's higher. And frankly, the reason I have him on my list is because, well, he's all that's left in that backfield. I know Tevin Coleman's back, but in all reality, Tevin Coleman I don't think is even a factor outside of the passing downs. JaMychal Hasty's probably going to get a bulk lion's share of the carries in that backfield, and he honestly has been fairly effective when given the ball. Or efficient, I should say, when given the ball. So I think JaMychal Hasty is really all that's left in that backfield. So it's somebody that you could add to your roster just because he's going to get the opportunity.
Yeah, I agree on JaMychal Hasty. I'm a little more worried about Tevin Coleman coming back than you are, though, because they have trusted him with the ball in the past in injury situations. But I don't know. If a guy like JaMychal Hasty, who's been able to prove himself on the ground, continues to perform, I don't know how much, at least groundwork, Tevin Coleman's going to take away from him. So I would definitely be open to a flyer on JaMychal Hasty for sure. My next guy I mentioned last week, Trey Burton. He's still owned in only 6.2% of leagues. And he has seen, at least, like I said last week, he's seen at least 5 targets in every game since returning from injury. And he gets the Lions this week, who I think are a fraudulent tight end defense. I'll get into more on that later. But I think Trey Burton is a pickup.
All right. I like the bold call there. I'm going to stick with the tight end. I'm going Richard Rodgers, the tight end for the Eagles. He's only 5% owned in, I believe, the CBS leagues again. Zach Ertz and Dallas Goedert are both out for an extended period of time. And this past week, Richard Rodgers had 85 yards on 6 catches. He was only out-targeted by Travis Fulgham. Nobody else in that roster had more targets than Richard Rodgers this week. So if that continues, Richard Rodgers could be a guy that you look for. And obviously a tight end is always a threat in the red zone. And he's a biggin. So Richard Rodgers could be someone. Richard Rodgers could be someone that can really help out your tight end depth at this point in the season.
Yeah. All right, move on to starts and sits.
I actually have one more receiver I can throw out there. And notice I didn't throw AB out there. Notice I didn't mention Carlos Hyde or DJ Dallas because I don't believe in either of them. But
me neither.
Sterling Shepard, wide receiver for the Giants. He's 28% owned in these leagues. Mm-hmm. And he's Danny Dimes' top target in New York. I know that offense is terrible. However, he's probably going to get opportunities to succeed, and he is back this week. So Sterling Shepard coming back is someone you can take a look at as a major flyer or super cheap in DFS if you want to go big elsewhere. He's something you could take a look at possibly. But beyond that, that is all I got. So let's switch it on over to start and sits.
Let's run it.
Go ahead.
All right. My start of the week is going to be Justin Herbert against Denver.
I like it. I have it too.
When QBs attempt 30 or more passes against this Denver Broncos defense, they are allowing an average 272 yards and nearly 2 touchdowns. Now you look at Herbert, who's averaging 37 attempts per game, and coming off a huge game, I think he's going to torch this Broncos defense.
Justin Herbert is the truth, and that Chargers offense trusts him implicitly, and he's going to tear up that bad Broncos pass defense this week. He is also one of my starts of the week. But my other one is a guy I've been praising all year and have said it from the beginning of the season.
I think I have the same guy as you do.
Ryan Tannehill going up against the Bengals. I expect this one to actually be a little bit of a shootout because Joe Burrow can sling it himself.
Yep.
And we saw that up against the Colts, who are a good defense. Titans pass defense is not good. So that means that the ball is probably going to get thrown quite a bit this week. And I think Ryan Tannehill is going to be a big beneficiary of that and torch up that bad Bengals defense with also a full slot, he's got his full repertoire of receivers this week with Corey Davis back, with AJ Brown healthy, and he brings Jonnu Smith to the table as well. So watch out for Ryan Tannehill to throw for a bunch of yards and probably several touchdowns this week as well. I love Ryan Tannehill in this week.
I'll add to that, saying that the Bengals, they've allowed 15 passing touchdowns through 7 weeks, which puts them up there with the likes of teams like Dallas, Jacksonville, Minnesota. And they just allowed 5 to Baker Mayfield last week. Yep. And also Tannehill, like you said, he's a touchdown machine. He's been a touchdown machine since AJ Brown has gone back from injury. He's on 3 a game since AJ Brown has gone back from injury. So And not to mention, I think Jonnu Smith will be a factor too because this Bengals team is terrible against tight ends. So
they're terrible in the pass against anybody in the pass. But I said it at the beginning of the year, and I'm going to say it again. Ryan Tannehill will finish with more fantasy points than Aaron Rodgers this season.
Ooh.
Yep.
Can we get a tracking on that? Where were we at with that?
I actually am curious. I'm actually curious because I have not been tracking it.
While you do that, I'll give you my first sit of the week. I'm actually going Lamar Jackson against Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh is only allowing 15.5 fantasy points per game to quarterbacks this season. Lamar Jackson is a guy who can get down on his legs, but they played a similar quarterback in Deshaun Watson, and he couldn't find any room to run against this Pittsburgh defense. So I don't have much faith that Lamar Jackson will either. That means he's probably going to have to try to get it done in the air, but like we talked about, the offensive weapons in that receiving core for Baltimore are lackluster. I don't think they're good enough to expose the Steelers secondary. The secondary has not allowed more than 2 passing touchdowns per game this season, and they're top 5 in the league in interceptions. It's going to be a bad week for Lamar Jackson. I sit him this week.
All right. To answer the question of the Ryan Tannehill versus Aaron Rodgers debate, it is pretty much dead even. Aaron Rodgers right now is 0.22 ahead of points ahead of Ryan Tannehill right now. It's 133.8 to 134.18 for Aaron Rodgers. So it is almost dead even with the fantasy points per game for Ryan Tannehill being 22.3 and 22.4 for Aaron Rodgers. So they are dead even right now. And both are having really good seasons.
Yeah.
My sit of the week at quarterback is going to be Josh Allen going up against the Patriots. If there's one thing and one thing only the Patriots do well, it's play defense right now. Their defense has been able to keep points off the scoreboard. However, their offense just can't put them up. So they've been able to force quarterbacks into some struggles. And I think Josh Allen may continue that this week as the Patriots are going to want to put some clamps on him.
I do have a second sit of the week at QB.
I do too.
Drew Brees against Chicago.
That's who I have.
He defied my expectations in week 7 against Carolina, but I don't think he does it again against Chicago. This is a team that's allowing only 10 fantasy points per game in the QB position. They are suffocating on defense. So I don't have much faith in Drew Brees getting anything done against them.
The Bears are a team that I just don't believe in, but I really don't think that I believe in their defense. Their offense is a dumpster fire.
Yep.
I actually have one more sit of the week and one more start of the week.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah, I have Tom Brady against the Giants.
Whoa.
He has a new toy in Antonio Brown. He's got his full repertoire otherwise. And the Giants' defense is hot garbage. My sit of the week is actually going to be Matt Ryan against the Panthers. Panthers have not allowed a lot of points to quarterbacks this year, and that probably will continue. He struggled against the Lions. He didn't have a great week, didn't have a bad week, but he certainly didn't have, he didn't light things on fire like we thought. So I think Matt Ryan's going to struggle a little bit against the Panthers. Watch out for them maybe to pound the rock a little bit if they can with Todd Gurley and set the tone with the run. But I don't expect huge things from Matt Ryan this week up against that Carolina team.
Yeah.
Switching to running backs.
I will add to that, though, that last time Matt Ryan faced off against them was just a few weeks ago in week 5, and they held him to 226 and no touchdowns.
Yeah, exactly. Switching on to running backs here. My start of the week at running back is Kareem Hunt against the Raiders. The Raiders, I still don't believe in them as a run defense.
Doubling down on it, huh?
I am. I know they had a better week this week. They did allow a touchdown to Ronald Jones, which kind of saved his week. But I think that offense and Kareem Hunt is just, well, not necessarily that offense, but Kareem Hunt is a different type of animal compared to Ronald Jones. And he's also a lot more involved in the passing game than a guy like Ronald Jones is. So I think Kareem Hunt has an opportunity for a massive week up against this Raiders defense. Because again, I do not believe in their run D whatsoever.
Yep. I'm going to go Clyde Edwards-Helaire against the New York Jets. I'm not afraid of Lev Bell being in this backfield. He hasn't shown me anything.
Not yet, anyway.
He didn't show me anything this past weekend that made me believe that he's going to take too many touches away from Helaire. And the Jets are a team that have faced only one top 20 fantasy running back this season, and that is Kenyon Drake, who I can't even believe is a top 20 fantasy running back. And they are still a bottom 10
Kenyon Drake's defense. A top 20 fantasy back?
Number 18 on the season right now.
What?
Yep, in half-point PPR.
That's kind of surprising.
Yep.
With the amount of dud weeks he's had.
Despite that, they are still a bottom 10 run defense.
Wow.
That means Clyde Edwards-Helaire is going to eat them alive. He's a top 10 running back in half-point PPR leagues, and he is going to feast.
I have... Now, mind you, this is if he plays. I don't know if he's going to play, but I have Joe Mixon going up against the Titans as a start.
He's probably not going to play.
He's probably not going to be playing, but if he does, we'll see. Have they actually announced if he's what his full injury was? Because I didn't.
But rumblings out of Titans.
Could miss multiple weeks with a foot injury, so you can just scrap that one entirely. So I don't have another one.
I have another one. It's a little more. It's a little more obvious, but I just had to shout it out. It's Dalvin Cook against Green Bay.
Okay, the low-hanging fruit. Come on.
He went up 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. We played in week 1, so I expect right around there.
Yeah, it's no question. How about Todd? Here's one. Todd Gurley going up against the Panthers. Panthers can't stop anybody on the ground, and I think Todd Gurley is a guy who's going to get some opportunities. He scored 2 touchdowns against the Lions on 65 yards. Yardage wasn't great.
One of them was on accident.
One was. Well, I wouldn't necessarily say on accident. It was straight up he just forgot the situation in the game. But the Panthers' run defense is terrible, and I think Todd Gurley has a good opportunity this week.
That's how the Falcons have to win this game is on the ground.
Yes.
So.
And Miles Sanders also is another guy you can take a look at up against the Cowboys because the Cowboys are
is he supposed to play?
Defense. I thought he was.
My sit of the week though is going to be James Conner going against the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens have allowed only 1 rushing touchdown on the season, believe it or not. And aside from Miles Sanders, speaking of the devil, breaking that 175-yard run against him a couple weeks ago, the most yards they've surrendered to a running back in a game is 72 yards. And that was to Kareem Hunt in week 1. So this team is deadly against running backs. James Conner's probably running into
James
Conner's probably running into a buzzsaw here. So I'm sitting James Conner.
So considering the Eagles are on a bye in week 9, there's a good chance he won't play to give him that extra week. So look at Boston Scott then. In that backfield is a potentially cheap option to go with for the Eagles because he did have a good week this past week.
Yeah.
My set of the week at running back is going to be Zeke Elliott going up against the Eagles. The Eagles against running backs have actually been really good. And also that offense has just hit a brick wall. They have nothing. Andy Dalton's down for a while. Obviously, Dak Prescott being out for the year. I just don't see any possibility for that offense to be successful moving forward. I do think that the receivers still have quite a bit of value in that offense. At least one of them, because he is the true number 1, is going to get the ball thrown his way, especially in the red zone. But beyond that, I think Zeke Elliott's efficiency numbers are going to be dropping significantly because ain't nobody going to be scared of the pass in that against that team whatsoever anymore. They're going to stack the box.
Agreed. All right, let's move on to wide receivers.
Go ahead.
I'm going Robbie Anderson against Atlanta. I'm just going to keep
I've loved Robbie Anderson this year, man. I've loved him.
I'm going to keep hammering this Atlanta defense until they prove me otherwise because they have now allowed 6 100-yard receivers in the season with Galladay going for 114 against them last week. And like I said last week, that could easily be 9 with guys like Metcalf, Flocky, DJ Moore all finishing in the mid-90s. I think Robbie Anderson and Teddy Bridgewater are going to have a day.
I agree with you on Robbie Anderson, and spoiler alert, the Falcons will never prove you their ability to stop wide receivers from putting up points. They will never show that to you. My start of the week is actually going to be A.J. Brown up against the Bengals. Like I said before about Ryan Tannehill, I'm doubling that down with A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown's going to have a massive week. See what I did there? He's going to have a massive week
with A.J. Brown.
With this matchup against the Bengals. Bengals can't stop anybody in the pass. So where I liked A.J. Brown, where I liked Ryan Tannehill, I love A.J. Brown this week.
Yeah. Bengals, I was actually doing some research on them earlier, and they allowed in week 7. Oh, my screen just blanked on me. Sorry. In week 7, obviously, they allowed 110 yards to Rashad Higgins. They allowed 108 yards to Marcus Johnson. So,
who?
These are guys. these are the guys they're allowing 100-yard games to. Marquise Brown probably had his best game of the year against them too, with 75 and a touchdown. So, I think that AJ Brown's fun.
Considering those guys are probably the number 2 options on their team, does this give you reason to believe that Corey Davis would be a really solid DFS play this week?
Yeah.
All right. Well, there's a hint for people out there if you're listening.
But it's like I do want to point out it's not like the Bengals have been good
against number ones. It's not like a situation where like the Cardinals in the past where Patrick Peterson shut down the number one, but the number two guy went out for like 150 yards every week. Yeah. It's not a situation like that.
Mm-hmm. All right, my next start of the week is Tyler Boyd against Tennessee.
They're not very good against pass.
Nope, their pass is almost completely collapsed over the past 4 games. In the past 4 games, they've allowed a total of 8 touchdowns and an average of 208 receiving yards to the wide receiver position.
That's a lot.
So since he's also probably going to be behind in this game, so I can see Burrow airing it out quite a bit. Like you said, it'll probably be a shootout. I don't have much faith in AJ Green in this wide receiver corps to really take advantage of the shootout, but Tyler Boyd will. And I think T. Higgins could probably be a strong play as well. But
I like T. Higgins this week also. I think he's a strong option as well in DFS. Probably a cheaper one. I've got Darren Waller going up against the Browns. Darren Waller.
You skipping to tight ends already? You didn't even do sits yet.
Oh, my bad. Jesus. My sit of the week is Adam Thielen going up against the Packers. And I'm going to double that down. He's on a bye this week. Mm-hmm. No, that was last week. No, Sorry. That was last week. Adam Thielen going up against the Packers. Mm-hmm. The Packers' pass defense is pretty damn good. I expect the Vikings to be able to run the ball at will, but I don't expect Kirk Cousins and that receiving duo to have a very good week. I think Thielen could be a tough play up against the Packers this week.
I'm going to go Kenny Galladay against Indiana. That Colts pass D has only allowed 3 wide receiver touchdowns since week 1, and they've held the likes of Thielen, Jarvis Landry, OBJ, Tyler Boyd all in check, and I think they can probably do the same with Kenny Galladay.
All right, I like it. I'm going to sit Tyler Lockett against the 49ers this week, and I have a couple reasons
Coming
for this.
off a 200-yard 3 touchdown
I have a couple reasons
ballsy.
for this. I do, and I'll give you my answer here. The 49ers defense has been pretty tough against wide receivers this year, not allowing a lot of points. And just that defense all around is pretty solid. They have had weeks where they weren't great, but they are 20, I believe, like in the high 20s in terms of giving up points to receivers. That's really good for defense. Obviously, first is bad, 32nd is really good.
Yeah.
So let me give you an idea here. All right, and this is another reason I don't like Tyler Lockett this week. He is no stranger to this massive game. I believe he had a 3-touchdown game earlier on in the season. He did against the Dallas Cowboys. The following week, he managed a mere 2 catches for 39 yards against the Dolphins. So it seems to be that anytime he has a massive week, that team looks DK Metcalf's way the following week. Because if I recall, the following week, DK Metcalf, well, I spelled his name wrong to pull up the stats. Yes, DK Metcalf ended up going for 4 catches for 106 yards against the Dolphins. So they went his way more than Tyler Lockett's way in that game, following Tyler Lockett's previous big game, and I expect more of the same this week. I also expect the 49ers to want to put the clamps down on him and don't let him beat you. Yeah. So I don't like Tyler Lockett in this matchup.
Okay. Any other wide receiver sets for move on to tight ends?
Nope, that was it.
My first tight end start of the week is going to be Jonnu Smith against Cincy, as I mentioned before.
I have him on mine.
He's been non-existent the last couple of games. Let's call it like it is. But I think he'll bounce back against Cincy, who's allowing a touchdown per game to the position.
I don't disagree at all. In fact, he's on my list as the start of the week. The Bengals defense is terrible all around, especially against tight ends and receivers and just pass catchers in general. Jonnu Smith, I do think he had a tough couple of weeks because he was still kind of hampered by the injury. I think that changes this week, and I do expect to bounce back in a big way for Jonnu Smith. But
Let's put it this way: if he doesn't bounce back this week, I'm almost full tilt on Jonnu Smith.
Wow. Okay. Well, then that makes it,
because I'm worried the last 2 weeks have been because of AJ Brown.
That's also a possibility as well. But my next start of the week is going to be Darren Waller against the Browns, like I said before. Browns defense gives up a ton of points to tight ends. I expect that to continue this week. It's actually one of the better matchups for tight ends. And I do think that there will be a little bit of scoring in this game. And Darren Waller has been very effective pretty much all throughout the year as he was last year. He's, I believe, the tight end 4 right now. So it's a guy I would definitely look at being a big matchup play here this week.
Yeah. I'm going to go Noah Fant against the Chargers.
Another good one.
Chargers have only played 3 teams with tight ends that are worth anything. That's Kansas City, Tampa Bay, and New Orleans. And in those games, those tight ends have averaged 75 yards and 1.3 touchdowns. Noah Fant, I think, is going to continue that tradition. Of the tight ends that came before him in those 3 games, give me Noah Fant against the Chargers.
Do you have any other starts? Because I do not.
I do have one more.
You have one more, and you mentioned it earlier. I know you teased it. That's why I waited.
Trey Burton against Detroit. The Lions haven't faced a real tight end all year before playing Atlanta. And then they allowed 6 catches for 68 yards to Hayden Hurst. I think this Lions D is actually more vulnerable against tight ends than the numbers actually lead you to believe. So coming off a bye too, and Burton being on a kind of a hot streak with his targets, I think he's going to pick up where he left off against Cincy.
I like where your head's at here, because if you look at years past with that linebacking core, they do not cover tight ends well at all, and or pass catchers well. They struggle in man coverage in that linebacking core. Now, adding Jamie Collins does make that a bit better, but beyond him, though, Jared Davis can't cover anybody. Jelani Tavai can't cover anybody. They struggle in man coverage, which is what the Lions love to play on defense. I know they've mixed some zone in, but they struggle against tight ends. And like you mentioned, they have not played a real tight end outside of Hayden Hurst, and he actually had a pretty good game. So I think you're going to see the fraudulent defense of the Lions start to show its hand a little bit here this week up against tight ends. And so I like that play. But switching to sits of the week here, I've got TJ Hawkinson going up against the Colts.
Agreed.
Whereas I don't believe in the Lions against tight ends on defense. I definitely do against the Colts. They are absolutely brutal to tight ends, and that defense entirely is brutal against anybody, especially tight ends. They do not allow much room, and I know TJ Hawkinson is the second best option in that passing game for Matthew Stafford, but I expect them to put the clamps on TJ Hawkinson this week.
Yeah, and Colts are actually very similar to the Lions in the fact that they too haven't really played a tight end worth a damn, but
I believe in that defense.
Even with that, they're only allowing 22 yards per game in that position and have yet to allow a tight end touchdown, which that's enough to scare me off Hawk this week. So I agree with you. He's my sit of the week as well. I'm going to add to that, though, George Kittle against Seattle. I love going big names this week, apparently. Versus Lamar Jackson, not George Kittle. The Seahawks have only allowed 1 tight end touchdown all season, and they're only averaging 47 yards allowed per game to the tight end position. The most fantasy points is a fun fact that a tight end has managed against them this season is 8.4, and that's in full PPR. That was Irv Smith. I'm not too excited about George Kittle.
I see your big name tight end, and I will raise you another one. I'd like to sit Mark Andrews this week up against the Steelers. The Steelers are another team that has been absolutely mean to tight ends that they've played. Not allowing very many points there, and like you mentioned, Lamar Jackson to have a tough game, that's going to affect guys like Mark Anderson this week. So I definitely would not be looking his way in terms of DFS as an expensive play, because you will not get the value that it's going to cost you out of Mark Andrews this week.
Any streaming defenses?
I do have one defense I look to stream this week, and it's going to be the Chargers up against the Broncos. Now, mind you, when I say I stream defenses, I stay out of the top 15 for defenses. So
I feel like Chargers might be expensive this week going against the Broncos, though.
They might be. It's not necessarily top. It's just top 15 in terms of how they perform this year. Okay. So they are outside that top 12. Sorry. Let me see where they actually are at. Chargers are actually they're 11. So I lied, but I still like the Chargers this week.
Go for it.
Going up against the Broncos. Oh, I do like one more. Eagles against the Cowboys. Because the Cowboys offense is dead.
Of the defenses I think could be pretty cheap this week, I don't love as much as I did last week. But
the matchups are brutal.
I'm going to actually go Carolina against Atlanta. Reason being, I think Carolina matches up real well with Atlanta. Atlanta loves to throw the ball, and Carolina is top 10 in the league in interceptions. So unless Atlanta leans on Gurley and is able to expose Carolina that way, I think Carolina can hold Atlanta in check like they did in Week 5.
That very possibly could be the cheapest or second cheapest defense to go with this week, considering the matchup in Atlanta, because they are brutal to defend. They put up a lot of points on the board against defenses. So if you are looking for a defense that might not be all that expensive and really does have an opportunity to put up some points this week, it is the Eagles against the Cowboys because, again, the Cowboys literally are on their third string quarterback this week. So you could see, and they put up 3 points last week with that third string quarterback after Andy Dalton went down with an injury. So you could see some turnovers, a lot of turnovers, maybe even a defensive touchdown for the Eagles defense this week. So I look them as being a potentially really solid streaming option.
Yeah.
All righty.
That's everything I got, though.
That is everything I got as well. We got through that. But thank you guys for listening. Andrew, thank you for joining me as well. And thank you to Detroit Sports Podcast. Check out our other podcast if you're a Detroit sports fan, The Fan Report. You can also follow us on Twitter at Real Fan Report. If you have any fantasy questions or anything like that, hit us up. Let us know. Give us a quick follow there. And we will catch you guys next week. Good luck. Not too much luck, especially in DFS because I want to win. And we'll see you guys next week. Have a good one.
Good luck in week 8.
Peace.